Order. Mr. Barry Shearman to move the motion.
Mr. Dowd, what a pleasure to possibly make my last speech in Parliament under your chairmanship. So this might well be quite, for me, a historic occasion if the rumours that are flying around come true about the statement at 5 o'clock today. But this is a very important issue close to my heart. And when I was a very young MP, before I was an MP, I was involved in a horrible collision in a car. Coming back from one of my daughter's christening, going back to my job teaching at Swansea University, someone drove into us head-on on the wrong side of the road. And I only survived, my family only survived because of seatbelts. And of course that gave me the passion when I got into the House to take an interest in transport safety, road safety, which I've continued to this very day. I'm President and have been Chair of PACS, the Parliamentary Advisory Council for Transport Safety, which I helped launch, and I still today am Chair of the Independent Council for Road Safety International. So I've kept that theme throughout my entire political career. That's an interest I've never given up on. And it's interesting, Mr. Dowd, you might remember, of course, that no, you won't remember, you're too young, but we managed to get seatbelts through the House on the night before the royal wedding, Charles and Diana, and we managed to keep our troops here. A lot of people went home for a long weekend, and it was the 14th attempt. And quite a victory, and that has saved a lot of lives over these years. I've continued my interest, and of course, the reason I've asked for this debate today is there are certain things that happen in the transport world that suddenly transform what we've been used to, absolutely revolutionise anything that we had as a concept beforehand. And e-scooters are that change. I have never seen anything so radically changing the whole landscape of safety on our roads. And the fact of the matter is it's certainly true that many people find e-scooters a convenient way of travel, a sustainable way of travel, and a very attractive and low-cost form of travel. And we do know that we're now in the situation that... Yes, indeed.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. While I was lead member for Environment and Climate Change at South Somerset District Council, we introduced one of the e-scooter trials, providing rural communities with a rare opportunity to engage in those trials, as most of them were delivered in more urban settings. These trials were a huge success, with only 8 recorded accidents. So would the Honourable Member agree with me that legal e-scooter usage can play a key role in allowing rural communities to reduce their car usage for those short about-town journeys?
I totally agree with the Honourable Lady. It is a fact that this is a vital way of transporting yourself and people in work, business, leisure, and where it's properly regulated, it is to be welcomed. But when it is unregulated, totally unregulated, it breaks all the conventions. And I'm talking about all the conventions in the sense that the rental scooter scheme, like the one that she's mentioned, and I think there have in total been 22 of them, they've been relatively well ordered and welcome. But on the other hand, we know that that accounts for about 20,000 rental scooters in the UK. But the estimate I've got is now between 750,000 and 1 million e-scooters that are being ridden on the roads and illegally. And not only ridden on the roads illegally, people are being killed and seriously injured on them. the impact on roads, there have been 37 deaths since 2019, and talking to the elected mayors, there are signs that that figure is a great underestimate. But look at the problems. I had my staff making sure that they knew how to buy an e-scooter. We were checking it only today. They're freely available for any age. They're available to buy for children. You can get them at Toys R Us in pink. They can travel up to 15 miles an hour, and some of them are advertised for 20 miles an hour. There are no regulations about what sort of what you should wear, protective clothing, no regulation on crash helmets. There is no regulation on insurance. And so if you are involved in an accident with an e-scooter and the rider is uninsured, that has a real repercussion on your individual, not only safety, but any possibility of compensation for the accident that has taken place, which was no fault of your own. So these things are freely available at any age, yes? We've looked today, here's a lovely advert here from Toys R Us. You can have one for £179, you can have one for £219, as small as £109 and next day delivery, and no indication that when you buy them, there are a set of rules and you should get training or anything like that. You just buy them, and presumably you just get on the road and drive them. And that's against the law. So they're freely available to any age. There are no regulations on what is provided when they're bought. And as I said, there's a very big difference between the insurance situation between private and rental. Speed limits, as I've said, they're quite astonishing. 15, the established limit is regarded in many areas as 15.5 miles an hour. They're available to buy, can go up to 25 miles an hour, and police have found cases of people fiddling around with the mechanism so they can go even faster, and apparently it's quite easy to do. We all know that at that speed you can kill someone, and you can also kill a child. So helmets are not mandatory. Head injuries are much more prevalent in the injuries that are happening. Very serious. A head injury. I said to a medic one day, what did it mean, a serious accident? And he said to me, very serious means you never walk again without pain. That's serious disability for the rest of your life. And in terms of head injuries, much more worrying and serious for the effect of the individual and their families. So, passengers. I, naively being something of an expert in this area, assumed that there was the laws for other vehicles would cover passengers for these e-bikes. They don't. They don't. There is no consequence for carrying a passenger. And I find it quite frightening when I see people going at high speed past me in the road and with a child, a small child standing on the running board, yeah? And it's at high speed with a large, usually father, but sometimes mother or relative. Imagine what a horror of an accident where you crush to death your child in an accident on an e-scooter. So this is a serious, and it's so serious because it's only just beginning. This is only just become a fashion. It's a fashion that it's going right across continents, right across countries, and some countries are being more adept at meeting the challenge in terms of the safety and security and welfare impacts. The particular dangers to, as I said, of children. It's mainly children being killed and seriously injured now. But there are very serious road users, people with partial sighted, people with buggies, and of course, don't let's underestimate the impact on NHS. we are picking up more evidence of accidents being reported that, when looked at even quite superficially, obviously cause e-scooter collision. And that is a huge impact on waiting lists, on emergency care, and all the rest. So, what are we going to do? We've got to increase the awareness of current regulations. We need to tighten appropriate framework and legislation. We've got to make sure that the police have the capacity to act when they see these illegal riders riding. I know our police are under great pressure, resources, and we know that, but it is absolutely vital that we do get the police making sure. I mean, I talk to so many people in my constituency. I said, do you realise they're illegal? You can't be riding these on the road unless you have you're on a leasing agreement. And they look bewildered. They said, well, we just bought it. Or a grandmother said to me, oh, I bought one for the kid's birthday. You know, a little child, straight on to a highly powered vehicle on the road. It worries me in the broader context also, Mr. Dowd, because across the piece, after many years of casualty rates in our country and across most of Western Europe, Australia, the United States, we have seen casualties coming down substantially. You know, with seatbelt regulation and other regulations, we have seen such an improvement that less people being killed and seriously injured on the roads. But this is a big change. This is that happy time. It seems to be going. And if I could put it in the context, Mr. Dowd, it's not just e-scooters. It's the report this week of a growing number of young people don't bother to get insured because it's expensive. Many of them riding on the insurance situation that could work when it was a few people that didn't have insurance, you know, is no longer fit for purpose. But everywhere we look in terms of what we call all C, if we're motorists these days, more careless, what I always called, they might be 55 or 65, but they drive like boy racers. Bad behaviour on the roads. And the first time, in all this time I've been a campaigner on this, you can see standards and conduct on the road deteriorating. Now, if we add this revolutionary change of so many people, imagine, a pretty accurate figure that everyone giving me is 1 million now, and it will be 2 million by next year. If that's the case, we are facing an epidemic of accidents, injuries, impact on the NHS. We need, obviously, speed limits, but we need to have them regulated and people given the appropriate punishment. And even the knowledge. I have a constituent who was coming down to London for a week, and he had an e-scooter, brought it all the way from Yorkshire. And he came into got to Waterloo Station, came out, got on his... Halfway across Waterloo Station, Waterloo Bridge, there was a check from the police. And he was astonished because they said, is it yours? He said, yes. And they confiscated it, and £200 a night while it was in storage. He also got 6 points on his licence. And then they said, well, are you insured, sir? He said, no. He lost all his car insurance. Yeah? Driving not insured. Not many people know that. And we've got to make sure that people do know what the law is, that the law is enforced, and we stop this scourge before it becomes a national pandemic. Now, you know, and we as public representatives, this is our responsibility, to be far-sighted. This is one of the greatest threats to children, to young people, and to older people. I see there was a 73-year-old killed last year on an e-scooter. So what we're coping, what PACS and all of us in the campaigning areas of wonderful, hard-working people, basing all of our recommendations to government on good evidence and what works in other countries. I say to the Minister today and to all my colleagues, wake up, because the evidence is there. This is going to kill many people, many children, and we must act quickly. Thank you, Mr. Dowd.
Thank you. I remind members that they should bob if they do wish to speak. The question is at this stage is that the House has considered e-scooter deaths and serious injuries. Judith Cummins.
Thank you, Mr. Dowd, and it's a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I also congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Huddersfield, for securing today's important debate and commend his lifelong campaigning on road safety in this place. If this is your last speech, it's a very, very worthwhile speech, and can I place on record my thanks to my honourable friend for Huddersfield for all his work. Since being elected as an MP, I've been dedicated to making our roads safer in Bradford South and across the UK, and this has led me to lead and support a number of campaigns that tackle dangerous driving and the use of illegal vehicles on our roads. I gave my name to the Honourable Member for Rugby's Road Safety Bill, and I put forward my bill to regulate the use of off-road vehicles and quad bikes on public highways. My quad bikes bill called for the registration of off-road vehicles, empowering police to remove nuisance off-road quads from our streets permanently. I also supported amendments to the Criminal Justice Bill just last week, which made important changes to the Road Traffic Act. In particular, amendments to create a specific offence of causing death or serious injury by dangerous, careless or inconsiderate cycling. The Act defines a cycle as including a pedal cycle, an electrically assisted pedal cycle, and also, importantly, an electric scooter. The amendments to the Criminal Justice Bill will be an important step forward in protecting people from e-scooter misuse and delivering justice to a degree for victims. I would also like to highlight the excellent work of my honourable friend who is in the chair for Bootle, who has worked tirelessly to make our roads safer and to deliver justice for victims. The recent amendments to the Criminal Justice Bill in your name, to which I have given my wholehearted support, would ensure that perpetrators can be held properly accountable under the law following a road collision. And Chair, your dedication and commitment to this issue is something that I and all members across this House look upon with great support and respect and admiration. However, e-scooters remain dangerously unregulated. As it stands, those available for public hire are available under the electric scooter trials and traffic signs regulations, which established e-scooter trials in major cities in 2020. And we were told by the Transport Secretary in 2022 that the government planned to introduce legislation to allow the regulation of e-scooters in the last parliamentary session. This clearly has not happened. The Department for Transport, surprise, surprise, has now announced that it will extend city centre trials of e-scooters until May 2026. And this dither and delay is simply not acceptable. The government cannot stand by while our streets are becoming more and more dangerous. In 2022, there were nearly 1,500 casualties in collisions involving e-scooters, including, tragically, 12 deaths. As my honourable friend from Huddersfield referred to, I am sure that these deaths and casualties are underreported. Some private e-scooters are known to reach speeds of up to 48 miles per hour, Mr Dowd. However, I've just Googled and found an e-scooter that can reach, shockingly, a speed of 80 miles per hour that was available to buy just on the internet. And this poses a great danger to other road users and, of course, to pedestrians. Over half of all casualties are taking place outside the legal trial areas, and so the current legislation is quite clearly inadequate. While use of private e-scooters is currently illegal on public highways, there are also an estimated 750,000 privately owned e-scooters in use in the UK that are often used on public highways and on our paths. Because private e-scooters are currently unregulated, they do not pass testing, standard setting or type approval. And so the law must urgently be updated to reflect the reality in our society. We need enforceable e-scooter regulations and not an indefinite trial period. I have previously raised in this place the case of one of my constituents who was taken to the accident and emergency hospital in Bradford with a fractured knee after being mowed down at high speed on a path by a reckless e-scooter driver. And this is but one example of a much wider problem, and this government must really get to grips with the reality of the situation and act. In 2022, the Minister for Transport said that safety is at the heart of our plans to create a regulatory framework for e-scooters. And so, having all but abandoned these plans for a new regulatory framework, the government is failing in its duty to protect all road users and pedestrians who remain at risk. Because, Mr Dowd, these vehicles are not harmless toys. They are capable of reaching high speeds and can be dangerous when not properly driven and not properly regulated. Mr Dowd, now is the time for new measures to be introduced to protect road users from dangerous and antisocial use of e-scooters on our streets and paths.
Gavin Newlands.
Thank you very much. Mr Dowd, it's a pleasure to serve under you. Can I congratulate the, I'm not sure if it's honourable or right honourable member for Huddersfield. I think after 45 years it probably should be right honourable if it's not. And if it is to be, and I think we'll know in the next few minutes, perhaps when I'm on my feet, I may create some headlines while I'm on my feet rather than the Prime Minister if I so chose to. But if that's the case, can I congratulate him and thank him for his 45 years of service in the House and to the people of Huddersfield. And it's quite an apt issue for him to go out on, if it is to be the case, given the work that he has done, as he outlined in his speech, on similar issues for decades now, and obviously outlined the serious car accident which he and his family were in, which led to his work. And so I thank him also for the work he's done on those issues. I think the main point, and certainly the first point that the honourable member made, was that this sector is totally unregulated, and obviously the contributions that have been made thus far, that is the main point. That there are various numbers about, but I think we can probably come to a consensus, because there's 750,000 to 1 million, or perhaps just over 1 million, in terms of e-scooters that are in use in the UK. I thought it was quite a good device when he brought up the advert. I think it was Toys R Us he used, but obviously other retailers are available, and you can get them from any number. But how freely available e-scooters are, and usually without any real warning as to their potential illegality or to training, etc., etc. So it's a real issue, and I think the government really have to take the blame here, because they ultimately promised regulation. In fact, it was the honourable member for Bradford South who quoted a Transport Minister when she said safety is at the heart of our plans to regulate e-scooters. Well, clearly we know nothing has happened since then. Another good point that was raised was the fact that I don't know how widespread it is, but certainly, and I've heard about it as well, in terms of those who tamper with their e-scooters to try and make sure that they can go faster. And obviously some of the e-scooters that are available already can go pretty fast, too fast, one could say as well. So that's a real issue. The honourable for Bradford South referred quite rightly to the amendments to the Criminal Justice Bill that would ensure perpetrators in some of the deaths, etc., and dangerous riding would be fully punished. She also said, she reiterated some of the stats that the honourable member for Huddersfield used, but she said that it's possible that casualties and deaths are actually underreported within these stats as well, and that's something we have to bear in mind as we look at this issue, because at the end of the day, the government has now repeatedly failed to regulate e-scooters for over a couple of years now. I am the transport spokesperson to the SNP. I sit on the Transport Select Committee. We've looked at this issue. We've been promised regulation, and it has never happened. And it looks like it'll certainly not happen this side of an election. Certainly, if it's being called as I speak. But there you are. Because in the Queen's speech in 2022, the government said it would create a new category of low-speed zero-emission vehicle in the transport bill. Obviously, the transport bill never transpired, which would allow obviously to regulate the e-scooters. The following year, in July, it said it intended to introduce legislation on micro-mobility vehicles, which would obviously at this time encompass e-scooters, when parliamentary time allows. And I suppose those of us who have been around Parliament the last few months, even not just the last few weeks, it's been rather a zombie Parliament with with a huge amount of time available. Had the government brought forward legislation, we might even have been able to bring forward rail reform with the time that we had available to us, but nothing was brought forward. And clearly the government has now left it too late, and whether the e-scooter regulation will be an immediate priority for an incoming government of whatever hue, however likely it might be, however likely it seems to be one way in terms of the polls, but it has to come as quickly as possible, because the point still remains there are up to 1 million or just over 1 million e-scooters in use. So we need that regulation, and we need it now, because we need it's not just about reflecting that reality, the numbers, it's about trying to make sure that the use of e-scooters is safe for the riders and for pedestrians and other road users. More than half, DFT numbers themselves showing that more than half of e-scooter collision casualties involve illegally ridden e-scooters, those out with the pilot areas. And if I look at this, a French study found that the fatality rate in collisions involving e-scooters was 9.2%, compared with 10%, actually was quite high for bicycles, which was another amendment that was brought forward as well, and 5.2% for motorcycles. So the fact that it's nearly double the fatality as compared to motorcycles is also quite telling. A study by the Queen Margaret University found that e-scooter riders were more likely to require admission to a critical care unit following an accident than cyclists, which obviously would stand to reason given the previous statistic. 13% more likely, and almost twice the number of e-scooter riders admitted had severe head injuries, probably because the vast majority of them don't wear helmets. Almost all deaths involving an e-scooter are those of the riders. Of the 12 killed in collisions involving e-scooters in 2022, 11 were the riders. Of the 7 killed last year, all 7 were the riders. And according to UK government figures, in the year ending June last year, there were 1,269 collisions compared to 1,462 the year prior. In terms of the Scottish situation, clearly legalising e-scooters at this point is not a priority, because we need regulation before we can legalise. It would seem fairly self-obvious, an obvious point to make, but legalisation is not an immediate priority. When the initial trial scheme was announced, Transport Scotland said it had been given no prior notice, and Scottish legislation enabling such a trial in Scotland had not been factored in. So therefore there are currently no trials in Scotland, and as such all e-scooter use in public spaces in Scotland is currently illegal. There were no recorded e-scooter deaths in Scotland in the 3 years to May 23, and with 9 serious casualties. So e-scooters have also been banned in ScotRail, or by ScotRail on trains, and other train operators following several battery fires in London. And the Cabinet Secretary for Transport from the Hislop, who gave evidence to the Transport Select Committee this morning on rail, said that there's an inevitability that electric scooters will be legalised in Scotland, but that public opinion is quite polarised and there are genuine safety issues. I think that is well known to everyone speaking today. Electric scooters are a challenge for everybody. She's seen the statistics on injuries for electric scooter users, and that is extremely problematic. When you're looking at a shared space, as we are in Scotland with the massively increased spend on active travel areas in north of the border compared to down here, we want to encourage people to do more walking and cycling, and whether that's compromised by where it's compromised by an electric scooter, that is a danger. It's not a current priority for us, and anything we did would be in consideration to the timing of what we do with more bus lanes and active travel lanes. They would all have to be managed at the same time to have sensible use of electric scooters. So that's the Cabinet Secretary for Transport. But the bottom line, and what the consensus will be leaving this chamber or this hall today, is that the government, well, it's this government or the incoming government after the election that's potentially been called as we speak, have to go on with this and make it a priority, because clearly it's not been anywhere near high enough on the government's priority list up to this point, given that they've missed 2 deadlines that they've set themselves. But we need that regulation and we need it now.
Thank you very much, Mr Dowd, and it's an honour to respond to this debate on behalf of the official opposition with you in the chair. I thank the honourable member for Huddersfield for securing this afternoon's important debate. He is a dedicated advocate on road and pedestrian safety. And on behalf of the front bench, I'd like to thank him for his tireless work and his leadership as President of the Parliamentary Advisory Council on Road Safety. And if this is indeed his last speech in this place, his swan song after 45 years, let me just say that I'm proud to have served with him and proud to be here today for his final contribution. I'd also like to thank all honourable members for their contributions, not least the member for Bradford South. I also share your concerns about the misuse of quad bikes. I would echo your praise for the member for Bootle and the chair for, again, his work on improving road safety and getting justice for victims. And also share your concerns about the potential underreporting of accidents involving e-scooters. And again, the member for Paisley in Renfrewshire, we've all been waiting for a long time now for this long-awaited comprehensive transport bill that never materialised. Mr Dowd, as Labour's Shadow Minister for Local Transport, I've met with dozens of stakeholders to discuss the issue of e-scooter safety and micromobility more widely. Virtually all of these stakeholders, who have all raised different challenges in the micromobility sector, tell me of the desperate need for clarity, certainty, and of clear indication of the way forward from the government. Ambiguity and confusion over the current and future legal status of e-scooters, both rental and privately owned, are an enormous source of frustration. From disability campaigners to local councils to digital mobility platforms to scooter rental firms themselves, I hear the same thing time and time again. We desperately need the government to end this damaging uncertainty. Mr Dowd, Labour supports the principle of greater mobility choice and the importance of embracing new technologies as they emerge. The ability to hire a small, lightweight, easy-to-use and zero-emission scooter on the street to complete a journey would have felt far-fetched in the UK, even 10 years ago. But they've now become a regular feature of many towns and cities. The rental e-scooter sector certainly would have not have emerged if it weren't for the advent of the modern smartphone, bringing new modes of sustainable transport that take cars off the road and encourage the use of active travel infrastructure. These are all welcome advents. But to ensure these positives are not outnumbered and outbalanced, it is plain as day that the sector is in desperate need for the government to show some leadership. Since e-scooters first hit Britain's streets, and with the infamous introduction of the first e-scooter trial zones in 2020, what has emerged is a confused patchwork of inconsistent standards and contradictory positions from the government. The government's first set of trial zones were due to expire at the end of November 2021. The government assured us that this trial would last 12 months and would be closely monitored so the government can assess the benefits and impacts. Then the trial period was extended to March 2022 because they needed more time to gather evidence. Then this was extended once again to November 2022 because they failed to properly issue safety guidance for the first time. Then the trials were extended a third time to the end of May 2024 because the government said it needed more time to reflect. And most recently, the government have extended a fourth time to May 2026. Mr Dowd, across the sector itself, and for the multitude of organisations campaigning on this issue, patience just hasn't run thin, it's completely run out. What was clearly intended to be a temporary study period has been extended and extended so many times that it's become an utter farce. After 4 years of constant extensions, 6 if these trials run their course, we continue to have no clarity on what the government intends to do next, despite repeated promises that e-scooter regulation would be included in a transport bill that never materialised. The government must not underestimate the impact this indecision is causing. Even rental e-scooter operators tell me the lack of certainty from the government is undermining their ability to invest in the UK for the long term. The government are therefore holding back potential tens of millions of pounds of investment into our economy and into the micromobility trade because they can't make up their mind. The government have provided guidance on e-scooter trial safety, but this is a far cry from the strong action that the sector and campaigners desperately need. Whilst the government dither, the reality on the ground is stark. The Honourable Gentleman for Huddersfield is completely right to draw attention to the deeply worrying levels of serious injuries and, tragically, fatalities that have been reported since e-scooters first emerged. The Honourable Gentleman is also absolutely right that the government's refusal to take the steps that they themselves promised to regulate on safety has led to this chaos. He's also absolutely right to highlight the potential underreporting of these casualties, as shown in the research by PACTS, and I'm extremely keen to hear what the Minister's response is to PACT's recommendation that the DfT must urgently improve data collection to address this issue. Because without firm data collection of the impact of safety, how can the government honestly believe that they'll be able to enact regulations, if they ever do, that put pedestrian and rider safety first? Many colleagues will be aware of the Guide Dogs Association. I had the privilege of visiting their offices and meeting their dogs earlier this week. They truly do incredible work. But what was clear from watching them in action was the scale of the impact that unregulated e-scooters are having on people with sight loss. According to research by Guide Dogs, 12% of people with sight loss reported their guide dog had been disturbed, and another 12% said that their mobility aid or cane had been hit by an e-scooter. In fact, half of people with sight loss who encountered an e-scooter reported changing their behaviour as a result. Some even said they've had to avoid parts of towns and cities altogether. Another huge impact on people with sight loss is the blight of e-scooters being carelessly discarded on the pavement. This causes havoc for people with sight loss. It confuses their guide dogs or makes navigating with a cane incredibly challenging and stressful. As far as I can tell, e-scooters strewn across the pavement absolutely constitutes an obstruction, a criminal offence. Under a properly regulated system, where there could be more stringent and enforced requirements on returning e-scooters to docks, these obstructions may be less of an issue. This is an immensely important problem, so I urge the Minister to assure those with sight loss that he's actually listening and clarify in his response whether this is something he intends to take action on. Certainly will.
That I mentioned PACTS in my remarks. We've always believed in evidence-based policy and what works in other countries. Isn't it time that the government and all of us woke up to what's a good practice across Scandinavia and other leading nations who've tackled this before us?
I think it's really important that we always consider evidence from all over the place to make sure that we have the legislation and guidance that befits our situation. But before I finish, I'd like to touch on privately owned e-scooters, Mr Dowd, as the reality is that the majority of e-scooters that we see used day to day are not part of these rental schemes, but are part of the estimated, as my honourable friend said, 1 million privately owned e-scooters used in the UK. Indeed, over half of the e-scooter casualties are outside of trial areas. 1 million privately owned e-scooters, Mr Dowd, despite them being completely illegal to operate on public highways and despite the government promising to crack down on them in 2022. Their widespread use is entirely because of the confusion this government has caused about their legal status. A huge issue I've heard from stakeholders, particularly the fantastic team at Electrical Safety First, is the deadly risk of chemical fires when people put their private e-scooters on charge at home. In 2023, there was an e-bike or e-scooter fire once every 2 days in London, a trend reflected across the UK. Often these are caused by inexpensive e-scooters bought online, often imported from abroad, that completely fail to meet UK plug safety standards. These are not just regular fires. They are what is known as thermal runaway that cause 600-degree fires and release toxic gases like hydrogen fluoride, stripping the lining from lungs. These would be completely preventable incidents with proper regulation from the government, so I urge the Minister to clarify what he's doing to tackle this. whether he intends to protect UK consumers from products that do not meet our safety standards. Mr Dowd, Labour knows there are enormous social, economic and environmental benefits from a thriving e-scooter industry. But from consumer safety in the home to insufficiently regulated rental schemes, it's clear that the government's current Wild West approach to e-scooters is immensely dangerous. With the right policies, e-scooters can play an integral role in a last-mile solution in a joined-up urban transport system. And I encourage people to take more sustainable journeys. But the government's current approach is letting pedestrians, whether disabled or non-disabled, down. It's putting homeowners at risk from faulty products and is frustrating efforts from e-scooter hire companies that want to play their part as a responsible transport service. I implore the government to urgently regulate these vehicles as soon as possible. Now, we've had 5 Prime Ministers, 7 Chancellors, 7 Transport Secretaries and 11 failed plans for growth. People across the country have had enough of the Conservative chaos and decline, a nation that is desperate to turn the page and move on. People have had enough of 14 years of decline that has cost them, their families and their communities. In transport, the Tories have failed to deliver a comprehensive transport bill. They've failed to act on e-scooters. They've failed to act on taxi safety standards. They presided over a shocking decline over our bus services and our railways are broken. Only Labour can bring the country together and deliver from infrastructure to our public services. Thank you, Mr Dowd.
Thank you. Minister.
Mr Dowden, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship in this debate, and I don't think it will be my last debate because I've got a speech tomorrow. But we're all awaiting an announcement, which I'm glad is delayed because I know we've got the nation's undivided attention here. I'd like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Huddersfield, whether or not it's his last speech, for bringing this really important debate to Parliament, and in particular his incredibly impassioned speech and the campaigning he's done over a large number of years on road safety. And I know, obviously, President of the Parliamentary Advisory Council for Transport Safety, and he's done a lot of work advocating a lot of reforms there. And I have met with them and I've gone through their proposals. I'd just like to say at the outset that e-scooters are revolutionary, there's no doubt about it. There are many people who like them. We heard that from Somerset and Frome. I myself have ridden them. But it's absolutely important to get the regulation right and to get and absolutely the heart of that must be safety. There is absolutely no doubt about that, and I think there's some absolute full agreement here. But on the other hand, we don't want to legislate in a way that we get it completely wrong and end up with making things worse. And I agree with the sentiment expressed by the member for Bradford South that these are not harmless toys. I mean, they're not, I think as you said, they are serious pieces of equipment, and it's very important that we have the right standards around them. I'll go through I'm going to do have a prepared speech here, but I'm just going to go through the various points raised and the sort of comments on them. And first of all, just on the actual data about deaths. The Honourable Member for Payton Renfrewshire North mentioned the death statistics. In 2022, there were 12 deaths from e-scooters, and 11 of them were the riders themselves, and 2 of those were within the trials itself. And in total on the trials so far, 4 people have been killed on the trial scooters. So it's clearly that the non-trial scooters, there's a far higher sort of instance of deaths there. And in terms of accidents, there were the latest figures that I've seen anyway. 2022, there were a total of 1,492 accidents, of which 12 resulted in death, and 440 of them were serious accidents. So it is very important that we, each of these deaths is absolutely tragic. Obviously, the serious accidents are obviously, can be potentially life-changing, and it's very important that we make sure that we get the legislation on this right. And I think pretty much every speaker has said we need to legislate on this, and I agree. We do need to legislate on it. Unfortunately, we don't have parliamentary time, particularly if the speculation is right. But I mean, the government has said before we need to legislate. But what we have been doing is trying to make sure we have the right legislation, and because it really is not clear exactly what the right legislation is. I mean, One of the honourable members mentioned that we should learn the lessons from other countries, and we have been looking at what other countries have done. Many of them have legislated, but they've all done very, very different things. They have different rules on do they require a helmet or not require a helmet? Do they require insurance or not require insurance? Should an ID licence plate be required or not required? Should people have a licence to be able to ride them or not? Should you allow them on the pavements or not? I think the answer there is absolutely clear, no. What should the minimum age be? Should there be a minimum age? And the minimum ages, some countries, 6 of them that we looked at in Europe have no minimum ages. Some have 10, some have 12, some have 14, some have minimum age of 16. And so that's why we wanted to use the trials to collect the evidence, to make sure that we understand how they're being used, how people are riding them, what the patterns of behaviour are, and what works and what doesn't work. And that's why we've been collecting data from these various different trials, so we can learn how they're used in the UK, but also learn the lessons from other countries. I think it is very important that we take the public along with us on this journey. It is a new technology, and people need to know that they've been kept safe despite the pace and scale of these changes. We only need to look across the channel at what happens, the impacts if we get this wrong, where the potential benefits are outweighed by the very real and understandable concerns. I'm sure the honourable member knows what's happened in Paris, where they banned rental e-scooters in their city following the so-called blitz scaling, where streets were overwhelmed by these newfangled forms of transport, and the public became very strongly opposed to it. And in other countries, such as Lithuania and Belgium, they've gradually introduced newer, tighter restrictions, having started out with a sort of more deregulated regime. I'll happily give way.
Chairman.
I'm listening with great interest, and he's obviously very knowledgeable at this area, but I do beg him to rapidly assess the best. Either side of my great friend here who recently campaigned in his by-election, I will be on him as well. Look, the worst thing you can have as a human being, I think, is to knock on the door when someone says your mum, your dad, your daughter, your son have been killed in a road accident. All avoidable. He agrees, I'm sure, of that, and this should give us the passion to make sure that even if we fit it all into an AI and come out with something quick, let's do it.
Minister.
Clearly, I agree. Look, all road deaths are absolutely tragic, but that's why it's so important that we get it right. And actually, they are. I'll come to some of the comments that the honourable member made, but they are illegal, completely illegal at the moment, and anything we do to regulate them or legislate them would be legalising something that's currently illegal and would presumably make them more widely used. And that's why it's really important we learn about the safety features of them and the way they're used, and what age limits there should be, whether we should legally require helmets or licences or whatever else. In other countries, as I say, they started out with more liberal regimes. Lithuania and Belgium have tightened them, and it'd be far better, and I think that quite damaged public confidence. We start out with a regime that's too sort of unregulated, as it were, and then we end up having to ratchet it up because actually the safety hasn't been protected, and that's why we really need to get it absolutely right. I think some of the other data I just meant that we have collected from our sort of evaluation is that certainly in the first evaluation we did from the trial data is that the accident rate is higher than bicycles, but we don't know whether that's just because it's a new technology that people are getting used to. And certainly in 72% of cases where there are accidents, it was on e-scooters. It was in the first 5 rides that they had, which suggests there is a sort of a learning curve here that once people have used them quite a while, they're less likely to get involved in accidents. And I should say, one point of reassurance, that 82% of accidents didn't involve other vehicles or other pedestrians. There was simply the riders just hitting something themselves. But obviously that could also be really quite serious. So just to come to some of the points that were made, I mean, the honourable member for Huddersfield mentioned the research he's done. I commend him on his research into Toys R Us, and I'm rather alarmed by what he said there, and I will follow that up with officials. They all have to meet product safety standards. Obviously, everything that is sold has to meet the Supply of Machinery Safety Regulations 2008. All retailers are required to tell the people who are buying them that they can't use it on public land, on roads or pavements, and we do monitor that. And we've got the market surveillance unit. Last year they took up 24 different online retailers that they found that weren't complying with this law, and some of them we had to go through the Advertising Standards Authority, but all of them are now complying with the law, those that we found that weren't. The year before, there was one that didn't comply by the law, even when we told them they needed to, and that is now in the courts. So we have taken legal action against those that aren't abiding by it, but I will ask my officials to look at the case of Toys R Us that he mentioned. That absolutely shouldn't be happening. The Honourable Member also mentioned the fact that police should be enforcing the law. They are illegal at the moment, the private ones, not the trial ones, obviously. It is up to the police to decide what to enforce and not to enforce. And I have, in my constituency, tried to encourage the police to enforce parking regulations. I just say that because I'm one of the few areas of the country where there isn't civil enforcement. And the police quite rightly make the point that it's up to them to decide what the operational priorities are. And I do urge the police to enforce this. I get frustrated when I see people on private e-scooters riding around, and it's clearly illegal, and I point that out. And I think there probably does need to be more enforcement. But that's the case whether or not e-scooters are legal or legalised through some regulation. On the point of fires that the Shadow Minister mentioned, I mean, there are it has been a cause of concern. I've met with the Fire Minister, with the fire safety people about it. It is the case, as he mentioned, that actually we think most fires are caused by people using wrong batteries or wrong connectors to batteries and so on. And it's a product standards issue, which is we are making sure is enforced. We have issued guidance on fires and to retailers and sort of more widely to the public of how to reduce the risk of fires there. The Shadow Minister also mentioned the issue about pavement parking and people with sight loss. Absolutely, that's is a real issue, and that's one of the things we've been learning through the trials is how to get people to park in safe places, having parking bays, for example. And the benefit of the trials is there's 22 of them. In the different areas, they try out different things, and you see what works and what doesn't work, and how to. And actually, I think that there has been dramatic progress on that. That actually, we now know far better how to stop people leaving their sort of e-scooters on the pavements causing hazard. But I must say this is only relevant really for rental scooters, because actually if it's a private scooter, you're not going to leave it just out on the pavement. It's a valuable thing. You'll take it home with you. But it's just an example of something where we have been learning through the trials. The Honourable Member for Bradford South mentioned some of the regulation of them in terms of dangerous riding, I guess. I should just point out that e-scooters are classified as motor vehicles, and they're covered at the present, all exactly the same offences as cars. So things like death by dangerous driving is already covered for e-scooters. Yeah.
What a shame.
Being very kind at this auspicious occasion, could you say something about the insurance side? People are going to get killed. People are going to their lives are going to be destroyed. What about the insurance aspect?
So the Honourable Member makes a very valid point, and that's one of the things, if we do legislate, we'd want to look at about whether we should require insurance or not. So in the 22 countries that we've looked at that have legislated on this, 18 don't require insurance and 4 do require insurance. We don't require insurance for pedal bikes, and there would be a sort of question about if we do require insurance for e-scooters, why don't we require them for pedal bikes? There's a whole range of different issues there, as well as the safety side of it. So that finally, and just conscious of the time, we did start a little bit late. I was asked by the Honourable Member about the PACT recommendations about data gathering. Absolutely, we are basically abiding by all the regulations. Officials met PACT just last month. We're improving police data collection of it. We're improving the trial data collection of it, and we're doing a second evaluation. We're about to launch a second evaluation of the data that we have from e-scooter trials. It's absolutely incredibly important that we do get the best information from these trials. So just wrapping up, I want to again thank the Honourable Member for Huddersfield for bringing this very important debate here. I agree with them that we need legislation, but it has to be based on evidence. I understand that during the course of this debate, or during the course of my speech, a general election has been called on July the 4th. So I think I can, if that is true, it is true. I can guarantee that we will not get any legislation in before the general election. And so whoever wins the next general election will have to do the legislation. But whoever wins the next general election will get the support of the officials of the Department of Transport, and they'll get all the information that I have about the need for legislation. So again, thank you for bringing forward this debate, and which has been, I think, very instructive. A lot of valid points made, and we will take some of that away. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I understand that the Prime Minister has spoken to the King early today to request the dissolution of Parliament ahead of the general election of the 4th of July. So, Barry Shearman to wind up, if you so wish.
I was surprised, looking at the time, I had opportunity. Could I say, Mr. Dowd, this has been an excellent discussion and debate. There are a lot of good people that are knowledgeable and care about this subject. It is almost a tsunami going to hit us. And we've got across them, it shouldn't be party political. We can make sure that we protect people, protect children, and we should act now. Thank you for the real contributions from my colleagues and from all the members that took part. And thank you, Mr. Dowd, for your wonderful chairmanship.
The question is that this House has considered e-scooter deaths and serious injuries. As many as are of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.